Good afternoon. Welcome to another week of We the People. My sidekick has fled over the border to Canada for a few days, so she's not here today, but Hyacinth should be back next week. I've got a guest. Some of you may know him. Probably a lot of you don't. He's the latest assistant police chief in Hartford, Jason Thody. He's not new to the city of Hartford. He retired as a captain, and then Chief Rosado brought him back as part of his team to deal with administrative issues and standards, and professional standards, things like that. So, welcome, Jason.
Thanks.
Happy to be here. One of the big things we want to talk about today is what's been a hot button issue for a while in the city and across the nation, actually, is the use of police body cameras. And I understand that we're close to implementing the use of those. A vendor has been contracted, and hopefully by the end of the year, Hartford officers will be wearing body cameras. So why don't you explain to us a little bit how that works and what's going on with that?
So this started probably a couple of years ago. We looked into the feasibility of having body cameras on all of our officers, and there's a lot of steps that you have to go through that you sometimes don't think about when you embark on this kind of thing. The implications of collective bargaining and unions, policy development, when the cameras are going to be on, when the cameras are going to be off, funding. So it's been a little bit of a process, but in the last couple months we were able to put a proposal in front of City Council and get it through. So we are authorized now. We selected a vendor that we thought would best fit what we're looking for here in the city, as far as to make sure that we're able to capture everything that we can with interactions with officers and the community. They're shipped. They're on the way here. So we hope to be able to roll the program out end of fall, beginning of winter sometime.
Now I would imagine, you've written a lot of the policies and updated a lot of the policies for the police department. I would think that's a big part of it, like when you can do what and when you can't do things. Somebody that called me this morning that we had talked about you coming on, he said, well, what about when officers want to turn them off? And, is there going to be a rule about when they can turn it on, when they can turn it off? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's a couple guiding lights for that. The biggest one right now is the Police Officer Standards and Training Council has a model policy for body-worn camera use, and that came out of legislation a few years back. That model policy will be the basis for our policy, and there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, that was agreed upon in collective bargaining between the city and our Hartford Police Union, that we would use the post-model policy. Number two, in order to receive any kind of reimbursement funding from the state, you have to base your policy on the post-model policy. So a lot in there about activating the camera, deactivating the camera, it comes from that post-model policy. We will expand on that. But you have to look at, again, with policy development, you have to look at privacy issues, you have to look at retention issues. So there's a lot, and we're just kind of scratching the surface on that now.
Well, I know, and I think some of it was in conversations I had with you originally, but there was also talk that these cameras are being integrated to the cruiser lights. So if the lights come on, the siren come on, the dash camera. And I think you had mentioned, or somebody had mentioned, that the body cameras would also start recording. I don't know if that's the case.
Yes. So one of the reasons that we went with Axon, which is the vendor that we went with, is that they integrate with the majority of the remote triggers that we have. So there's a button where the officer can turn the camera on and off. We do expect that to be one of the ways that we activate the camera. But if an officer is confronted with a quickly escalating violent situation or something where they step out of their car and it's very active, we don't want our officers fiddling around with the camera to try to turn it on. We also don't want to miss that interaction. That's one of the things about body cameras is that it's supposed to increase transparency and it's supposed to increase public trust. When you start having, whether it's an officer involved shooting or whether it's just a general use of force that's not captured on the camera, that tends to erode public trust.
Got to take the human factor out of it.
Right. So exactly. So what Axon has is a number of automatic triggers where when you turn your lights on right now, our cruiser cameras, the ones that are permanently mounted in the camera in the car, we only have a few of those. When you turn the emergency lights and siren on, it automatically activates the camera. So it takes the human element out. If the officer's involved in a pursuit and they're driving fast, they don't have to be fiddling with the camera. Same thing with the body cameras. Our Axon tasers, our ECWs, our electronic control weapons, when you activate them, when you turn them on and you turn the light on and the laser on, that will activate the camera. It will also, not only will it activate the camera, but when it activates the camera will go back 30 seconds to a minute in time. And that's something that we can set how far back in time it goes. So the camera is always spooling that. If we set it, let's say hypothetically, and this is something that we'll discuss with our policy committee, but if we set it to a minute, let's say hypothetically, my interaction with you starts to go bad. I press the button, it goes back 1 minute. So I catch what precipitated the incident as well.
So are they essentially always recording?
They are always recording a 1 minute buffer and not saving it. So the 1 minute is constantly falling off the backside. The new 1 minute is constantly coming in the front side. It won't save it unless you press record. When you press record or you have an auto activation, let's say if I jump out of my car and I have a hostile individual in front of me and I pull my taser out and I turn my taser on and that automatically activates the camera, it'll go back that 1 minute to see what happened when I arrived, when I drove up. It's important in a lot of these use of force incidents, and a lot of these issues that turn into either citizen complaints or confrontational encounters. It's important that we see what precipitated it. So that's another technology that the camera has.
I know you mentioned a taser, and I know one of the things originally was also to have a sensor in the holsters for their firearms that when they unholster their gun, it would start recording.
Correct.
Which seems like one of the most critical times you should. I think we'd need that more than we would the taser.
Yep.
But is that something that's still going to happen? Or I know
It's
there was
there.
some argument about
No,
that.
there is technology that will do that, not with our current holster. So in the interest of not retraining our entire department so the holster that we have and that we use, it's served us well as far as retention and security goes. We are waiting for them to integrate that technology into our holster, so we would be able to, we wouldn't have to retrain the officers on the muscle memory of getting their gun out of their holsters and things. So that is technology that's coming. Axon already has it. It is in different model holsters than what we have, but that will be a technology that comes. Opening the back door sensors, so when you open the back door of the car, when you're presumably going to load somebody back there, that can activate the camera. The lights, as you indicated, they can activate the camera. The taser can activate the camera. There's a whole plethora of things that can activate the camera. The other nice thing about the Axon is that if you and I are both officers and we're on scene and you're speaking with the subject, if I engage my camera, it will automatically turn on your camera and any camera in a 30-foot radius. So if I take my taser out because things aren't starting to go well, and I turn my taser on, I now have my view and I have your view.
You get several different angles.
If my car is close, if my car is within 30 feet, my car camera will automatically turn on. If another officer shows up, his or her camera will turn on. So now we're gonna end up getting 4 or 5 different viewpoints. Because as you know, sometimes your hands are in the way of the camera, you don't necessarily always see what's going on. You'll get a bunch of different viewpoints. And then the evidence.com software that comes with these things will sync that up. So we can look at it in real time from 4 or 5 different viewpoints.
Now, besides patrol, who else is going to be? Is it every uniformed officer, or a detective's going to have them too? Or
so that's kind of yet to be determined. We have 325 units coming. We have about we have about 385, 390 officers right now. We have to look at that. We know that all of our patrol units will have them. Traffic division will have them. Our CSOs will have them. The folks that are out on the street every day will generally have them, but we want to have them so that if some of our detectives, especially our more proactive, like vice intelligence and narcotics, if they're going to go out and they're going to do some proactive work, we want to make sure they have them on. We want to make sure we have some that can be signed out for private duty or Meadows events. If you have an otherwise admin person that goes out and works the street, we want to be able to have access to that. So the details of that are going to be kind of worked out, but we want to make sure that we have the best chance of having an officer at a situation that has at least one camera, and that's how we're we're deploying them.
I know like a lot of either the cruiser cameras aren't working or they haven't been replaced, and they're an older type system, which the clarity isn't that great on them. So these are supposed to be state-of-the-art cameras, basically, with great video or great hard drives or
Correct.
to an SD chip or however they save it.
So that was another benefit that we had with Axon, is that we are 100% cloud storage. We don't have to worry about degrading the quality of the video because we're running up against storage limitations. So with the cloud-based storage, the camera stores the information in the camera, and then every time the cruiser comes into the station, or we have hotspots where it will likely be in some of the substations as well. So when the officer pulls up, that is Wi-Fi. It is automatically being uploaded into the servers, into the cloud. So the car cameras and the body cameras will both be doing it.
Now, I think that it sounds like it's similar to what Weathersfield did a couple of years ago, where when they pull into the back of the station at the end of their shift or whatever, it automatically starts downloading the video from the cruiser,
Correct.
the video from the cruiser.
Yep.
And that's been one of the big drawbacks. If you talk to most police departments or police chiefs that are either contemplating or have gone to body cameras, the storage costs are the huge factor. It's not so much purchasing the cameras. It's when you figure you've got all these cameras going essentially 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that's an awful lot of video to be stored. Now, how are you getting around that? Or
So that's one of the reasons that we went with Axon. Axon offers a program where because they're a big company and they're able to buy a lot of storage, we have an unlimited storage package. So all of our camera footage will be stored in the cloud. It is triple redundant for safety purposes. It's certified to be compliant with the latest and greatest security requirements. And that is our data that will be stored on their servers. We have instant access to it, but we have unlimited storage that is bundled into the price that we pay for the cameras. It's not an additional storage cost. And then we can set our retention periods, which will be based on the post-model policy, but how long that information stays there before it falls off the back. Once we earmark a video for being important, whether it's because we think it'll be involved in a criminal prosecution, whether we think it could be involved in litigation or citizen complaint, it is then stored until we get rid of it.
okay, now one of the things, and you would explain the software to me a couple months ago when we were talking about this. The video is also encrypted by the type of incident. So like the police, like a 1034, which is a
Yeah.
traffic stop, you can go back and just pull up 1034s for that officer without having to go through 8 hours of video to find everything.
That's another key element to the vendor that we selected. Axon is a very integrated vendor. So what Axon will do is they integrate with our computer-aided dispatch, our CAD system. So if I'm a police officer and I go out on patrol and I pull over a car and I call it in as a 1034, the dispatcher types into the system that I am out on a 1034, which is a motor vehicle stop. If I change it, it's changed in the system, and it then is tagged as well. So the video will take the time that I enacted my camera. It will look at what call I'm out on, and it will tag that video as a motor vehicle stop. So if I get a complaint from a citizen later on that said, I was pulled over by someone, I don't know who they are, they didn't give me a ticket, but I think they were rude or whatever, I can go back and look for a 1034, a motor vehicle stop in that time frame, and it allows me to find that video that much quicker.
But that, providing an officer called it in.
Correct.
Okay. So
Correct.
if
The officer
somebody's
would have
making
to
traffic stops without calling it in, then you got to search video
Yes.
to find that.
Yeah, I mean, an officer could make a traffic stop without calling it in, well, if they activate their lights, their camera will automatically activate. So at least there'll be a trigger where I know something happened.
Okay, and I'm
The
sure that'll all
camera
be part of your policies
Yep.
as you develop them.
Yep.
You know, I know, and you know, I love to use the Freedom of Information statutes, FOI. Now, how does, not just your department, but other departments, how do they handle that? Because if I'm a police officer, I'm out on patrol, and for whatever reason my camera is recording or whatever, and I have an argument with my wife or a conversation with somebody that doesn't necessarily apply to police work, or you've stopped the car, your lights are going, and you're talking to somebody on the phone while you're at a traffic stop. Who has the right because I think under FOI, I could say I want all this officer's video, but somebody should be saying, no, that's not job related, so we're not gonna provide that. Are there exemptions in the statute yet, or is that something that has to be done by the legislature, or how do you intend to handle that?
There is a lot of information that most of your camera information is going to follow the FOI rules. There's not an exemption for body-worn camera, except, as you saw, I believe it was, I forgot what major incident, it might have been the Cheshire homicides that, where they amended the FOI statutes to eliminate like graphic and gory pictures that can depict things that don't have a public function. I think the body cameras would fall under that as well. But we have a sergeant and a detective that are in our FOI division. We do anticipate that the FOIs will go up. Every department that's gone to body cameras has seen that. Some very progressive places like Seattle will stream their police video out so that it all can be seen. It's pre-redacted. I don't think that we'll be doing anything like that. That's a major undertaking. But we have a lot of technology. We have C4, and a lot of our crime analysts will probably be taking care of the video, both the redaction, the FOI requests. Evidence.com, again, one of the reasons that we went with this vendor is that software allows us to do all of our redactions, all of our editing, and all of our selecting a video for FOI right within that program. A lot of the other vendors, you had to actually download the video to a second software system to be able to do any kind of redaction, any kind of video editing or cutting to give people the sections of information that they're requesting. With Axon, it's all able to be done right inside there. I imagine that the Corporation Counsel attorneys will be involved in that to some degree when we get a questionable one. I think there's going to be a learning curve there. We will do our best to include all of that in the policy, but I envision things coming up that we don't know what to do, and we'll have to reach out.
I'm
to
sure
research.
it'll be changing as
Yeah.
technology improves and changes. 10 years ago, nobody thought about body cameras. So,
Correct.
It's going to change, but anytime there's, not in Hartford because luckily we haven't been in that situation, but anytime you see where there's a officer involved shooting or things like that, all of a sudden the conspiracy theories start. So what safeguards are there that somebody can't get in and erase video or doctor video, things like that?
That comes
how is that
from,
safeguarded?
Again, that comes from the vendor and the way that their software works. I mean, the video that is encapsulated in those cameras is stored there. It can't be altered in any way inside the camera. Once you go to the police department, that is automatically uploaded via secure Wi-Fi. It goes into the cloud where it is immediately available, and then it falls under the Evidence.com software. Now, everything that you do is all tracked by that software. It is whether I go in and view it, whether I go in and I say, okay, of this 10-minute video, I want these 3 minutes so that I can release it on an FOI request. When I extract that video, it tracks that. It shows that I did it. It shows what I did. So there is a lot of security measures in place through Evidence.com to make sure there's no manipulation of the video.
Okay, now this Evidence.com, do they have redundant servers, or how are they backed up to make sure things don't get lost during a power outage or whatever?
Evidence.com is a triple redundant server located in different parts of the country, West Coast, the Midwest and us, and Axon uses a certified vendor for their storage, and that's another reason why we went with that. I mean, as the city of Hartford, I think that our technology infrastructure is pretty good, but it can't be as good as a multi-million-dollar company that does nothing but technology work. So we thought that our data would be far more secure in the cloud, being housed by them. Not to mention that it saves us a lot of money. Than it would be on our own servers that are probably more susceptible to hackers and things like that. That is something that other places, other departments have struggled with. You don't always think about somebody's going to break into your servers and try to get to your police video, but it has happened.
Yeah, and there's no sense of reinventing the wheel if it's already out there working and working well. Now, and I don't know if I talked to you or Chief Rosato about this, but one of the things that if somebody is arrested and the charges are dropped or nollied or whatever through the court, under state law, you have the right to ask for all the documentation of your arrest, your fingerprint cards, your photographs, everything like that back to be destroyed. So there's no record anywhere on paper of your arrest. How do you handle that with all this video, with the number of arrests that Hartford makes? Is somebody gonna have to sit there and edit that video to take, if you arrested me tomorrow and I get everything thrown out of court and I say I want all of it back, which includes video, does somebody have to then sit there and edit that out? And
So there's two ways it could happen. Number one would be we could manually go in there and delete it if it occurs quickly. The retention periods are, places go anywhere from 30 days to 90 days of a retention period. If the court doesn't otherwise tag that video as being part of the case, then that video will automatically go away during that at the end of that retention period. So it will no longer be available at whether the case is nolly, dismissed, or whether you're convicted. It doesn't really matter. If no one tags that video or no one indicates that video is important, it will then fall off the backside, for lack of a better term. If in fact it is tagged as important, there was an assault, the video shows something that's important to court, we would in fact bring that video out of the general cloud and into the evidence portion of the software. It would fall under the same guidelines as fingerprints, as photographs, as anything. So when someone gets dismissed, that video would also be removed. And there's a code for that in evidence.com to show not everyone has access to it. You have to have the administrative privileges to be able to remove anything from evidence.com. But that would be a classification code, nolly after 13 months, dismissal, whatever it might be, and that would go away that way.
now, I know you've been involved quite intimately with this whole process and doing the research and policy and everything else. Do you know, are there any studies that have been done or any factual data that indicates, do police officers tend to act differently when they're wearing a body camera in the way they interact with people? Do suspects tend to interact differently when they know they're being on video?
So the very first study was the Rialto, California study. They were a very progressive department on the West Coast, and really they implemented the body camera program with the intent to really study it. They didn't do it just kind of the way we're doing it. They implemented it because they were one of the first departments that did it. They used a lot of control measures. They had cameras out there that really didn't have any guts in them, that didn't actually record anything. They had certain shifts that didn't have any cameras. They had certain shifts that had working cameras. And the chief out there did a great job, and it's a great study. It's available online. And so it does show that, and I think every study that's been done since that one shows that it does change behavior. It changes behavior on both the officer's part, and it changes behavior on the suspect's part. Now, what's important to remember about body cameras that sometimes we all can lose sight of, I've been intimately involved with this process and trying to get it here, and so I've lost sight of this on occasion, is that these aren't a silver bullet. This is not a one-stop shop for fixing all community police relations and to solve every case that comes up. There is information that this is a tool. This is an added tool that could give us
tool on their belt
that could give us some more information than we have, that can help figure out what happened at a given scene. This is a tool that will help us train better, where we can actually show our officers what works and what doesn't work. It's not important just to take the ones that don't turn out well and say this is what you shouldn't do, but it's also important to show a successful situation where an officer is able to de-escalate, maybe somebody with mental health issues, or an officer is able to go out and engage with a homeless individual and get them services. And we want to show our other officers how those things turn out when they go right as well. But they're not, they're not a magic, some kind of a magic thing that's gonna eliminate police misconduct, that's gonna eliminate suspect misconduct. But what the studies have found is that I think in the Rialto study they saw an 80% decrease in citizen complaints. A lot of the folks when they were coming in were allowed to see the video before they made the complaint. And many of them said, oh, I didn't interpret that the right way, and they left without making a complaint. And it's not a system that's designed to discourage complaints, but a lot of times folks they tend to look at things differently when they see it a second time. Both officers.
Or when you're
and
upset,
suspects.
right, during a
Tempers
negative.
are flaring.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that or if they see that 1 minute prior, I didn't realize that the officer was dealing with that when they approached me. I didn't realize. They might even hear the call come in. They might have been stopped by the police in a citizen encounter, and the camera you may hear the dispatch come in, and they say, oh wow, I really did fit the description of that person, and that might solve some issues. So they're good. They're not the end all be all, but they're definitely a step in the right direction for us all to kind of understand better what our officers do every day, what our citizens do every day. But they also found, like you said, that our individuals that the officers are interacting with, when they see the little light, when we let them know that they're being recorded, people tend to behave differently when they're being recorded. We probably are behaving differently right now that we know there's people watching us, right? There's no way to escape that. Your colorful language tends to decrease significantly when you're being recorded, and your explanations tend to get a little bit better when you're trying to explain something to someone. So most of the
because
studies
it's
show-
no longer he said, she said. There's video evidence of exactly what you did, and that's to the point about how people act differently. I don't know how many. It was a few years ago that Hartford did a test of body cameras,
Mm-hmm.
and I know one of the officers that was wearing one as part of the study or test, whatever you want to call it, and he says he would go to something where the person was very upset. He would touch the camera, a little red light would come on and start recording, and the person would say, what is that? Oh, this whole incident is being recorded on video. And he says they would come right back down to earth, and it would be a totally different situation. So
It's true. Like I said, that probably doesn't work all the time. But I think the perception that, hey, this is being recorded and we're going to know like what's being said here does change behavior. Every study has found that. I mean, there are situations where no one's going to, by the time the officer gets there, it's so escalated that they don't care that little light's on. And it's going to be what it is.
not everybody's going to be rational, and
But if you can de-escalate 25%, 30%, 40% of your interactions with the community, I mean, that's a win.
an 80% reduction in citizen complaints, that would be huge.
They also saw, and I don't have the stats in front of me, and I dare not say them where they can be thrown back at me, but I think in the Rialto study, if you look it up, their use of force incidents went down significantly, especially as compared to the shifts that didn't have cameras. That was a big control group. The use of force incidents went down quite a bit, and that could be attributed to a lot of things. It could be contributed to, like you said, the de-escalation effect of the camera itself on both the officer and on the subject. It could be attributed to the officers behaving more within their training. They'll tend to reflect on their training more because they know it's being recorded. There's a lot of reasons for it, but I think it's very difficult to find scenarios that make it a negative. I think it's a positive.
Now, do you think the majority of the rank and file police officers are accepting of body cameras, or is there still some pushback that it's like Big Brother watching everything they do, or is it just the sign of the times, it's going to happen, we might as well live with it?
So I think that predominantly it's a sign of the times, and we're going to live with it is a sure thing. In my position now, I'm not out there in the cruiser, pulling up side to side with a lot of the men and women that are actually on the ground doing the job right now. But my sense in the folks that I've talked to is that it is much more accepted now. When the idea first came out, we tend to be resistant to change, right? People tend to be resistant to change. And I think there was some resistance to the idea of body cameras coming to Hartford. Oh, Big Brother, like you said, these things are going to be used to get us in trouble. And, that's not the case here. And I think a lot of officers have become accepting of that. We did have a couple situations. I mean, this has been a long time coming. Like I said, we've been actively working on it for the last year or two. But the word that we were going to get body cameras goes back much further than that. And we had officers that would wear GoPros to work to try to record the interactions that they had because they thought it protected them. Especially in a in modern times where we know that a lot of the people that we're interacting with are videotaping us and with cell phones, and we are being recorded by cameras in gas stations. We're being recorded a lot more often than we were 5 to 10 years ago. So I think, that the saying that I've heard before is that I'd rather have my video than rely on someone else deciding when to turn a video on and off. How many times have we had a cell phone video that was, we only get a little piece of it. Even in recent ones, we don't always get the full video in the beginning. Sometimes we get the whole video by the end. But if we're controlling the video and when it's turned on and when it's turned off, we're going to get a more independent picture. We're going to be able to see what happens.
Well, I like the part where you mentioned that, everything in a 30-foot range starts recording, because that gives you, instead of missing something because somebody's standing on a camera view and swings at a cop or the cop swings at them or whatever, now that's going to be caught from different angles. So, you see exactly what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I have, a lot of the officers I speak with have all been, they can't wait to get them.
Yep.
Because they know it's going to solve a lot more problems than it's going to cause, especially if you're doing the job right and you're being, pleasant to the people you deal with, or maybe pleasant as a professional to the people you deal with. You got nothing to worry about, I don't think.
I agree.
So.
I think that very early on, I think I was at International Association of Chiefs of Police Conference, or I was somewhere where I heard someone say that 9 out of 10 officers will welcome the body camera, and the one is the one you got to worry about. It's like these officers are not concerned about what ends up on those tapes, because they know that they go out there every day and they do their job and they act professionally, and it's the ones that are worried about it. It's like, what do you got to hide if you're doing your job and you're doing your job the right way. So if you can take that one officer that and you can alter behavior even just slightly, that's a win, right? If you can get that officer to conform to the policies, procedures, and the level of professionalism that we're looking for.
Now, are most departments in the state using or planning on using body cameras at this point? I know the state was paying for them. It is up until.
I think most are planning on it. I don't think most have them. I do know that New Haven just got them. I know that Bridgeport is in the process. We went through the procurement around the same time as Bridgeport. We were in constant communication with a lot of these departments that were going through the procurement at the same time. East Hartford is going through the procurement right now alongside of us.
State police
have decided on a vendor. They have gone to them. They don't have them outfitted yet, but they, like us, they went with a bigger package that included some in-car cameras as well. Like you said, we're down to very few in-car cameras that are actually operational, so we're revamping our in-car systems as well, and we're taking advantage of the state reimbursement as well.
But even the in-car systems were so cumbersome, because a supervisor would have to go and pull a hard drive out, slide a new hard drive into it. Yep. When the hard drive got full. Now that shouldn't be happening, because it's going to download automatically.
There is no hard drive to pull. So, I don't know how many times that we've run into a situation where we went to look at a video and the hard drive was full during the incident, so it didn't capture it. Yeah. That's very disappointing to us when we think we might have something captured on video that shows what happens, and then it's like it's not there. So the new cameras in the cars, so there's two benefits. Number one, they're very small. Axon has created a version of their body camera that becomes the in-car camera. So it's not as cumbersome. It integrates with our existing MDT, so you don't need a second screen, so that what's being recorded is able to be shown on the screen of the MDT, which is great. Oh, okay. And then the real advantage is that the new ones have a camera in the back. So it will also be recording the individual in the back.
That's what I was going to ask you, because I've seen, on TV programs, real life, where they also videotape or record the back seat. Yep. So if you've got a prisoner in there and you're bouncing them around to hit the screen or whatever, it's going to be captured on video.
Correct. Or if they're trying to get out of their cuffs,
yeah.
If they're trying to slip their cuffs, or we did have an incident years ago where someone was able to slip their cuffs, open the window between the back and the front, and then take the car. That was probably 15 years ago, but it would be good to be able to see that that's occurring through the video.
I think that officer retired.
Yes.
But it
happens.
Yeah,
if you can think it up, it could happen. and having the video show the back of the car. You know, we've had people try to commit suicide in the back of the car, and if the officer, we can't have the officer looking back there while they're driving forward. But if they can see that, if they can see these movements that aren't consistent with just sitting still in the back of the car, maybe something damaging can be prevented.
But I think the person slipping out of their cuffs, coming through the screen and taking off with the cruiser, that would definitely be a viral video on YouTube.
Yes, you would have to lie that, I'm sure.
I might even have it sent to me, who knows?
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
You, and I'm not sure how much was you and how much was purchasing, but it sounds like you negotiated a great deal on this equipment and a huge savings to the city for replacements and 2.5-year replacements of everything. Is that typical, or is that something that the city took advantage of because of a?
I think it was a lot of things. You know, I think there's something to be said for the fact that we are a heavily union populated part of the country, and getting the cameras here was difficult for the vendor.
For better or worse.
Right.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah, exactly. And so I think that the vendors, all of the vendors that were vying for this contract, were really interested in getting here. I think to be combined with that, you know, it's this particular deal. One thing about the city, and it's a financial thing, right? Like, we know we're going to get reimbursed for this first year spending from the state, to the tune of somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000. We're going to get reimbursed, and that's something that all other departments that are doing this program are taking advantage of. But what happens after that? What happens in the years after that? And that was what I looked at. And how do I know that that the city of Hartford is going to have money available to fix these cameras in 2 or 3 years, or even
Which is
5 years.
inevitable.
And you're going to need to replace them. They're a piece of electronic technology that's not going to last forever.
And it's going to be out in all kinds of weather, rain, snow.
Absolutely. The officers are getting in and out of the car with them. They're inside the jacket. They're outside the jacket. They're being popped on and off these clips that hold them to their uniforms. There's literally a lot of moving parts.
Right.
So my concern was, what's the damage if we have cameras and then next year we have 10 less, and then next year we have 15 less, and then next year we have 50 less because they're starting to break, and we're in a financial situation where we just can't replace them. And I thought that would be damaging to the department. I thought that would be damaging to the officers, and I thought that would be damaging to the community. So the better way to go, we did a lease program where our cameras, all of our cameras, will be replaced at year 2.5, and then again at year 5. So this deal that we negotiated with Axon, the vendor, provides us with assuredly 325 cameras at day 1, all the way through year 7.5, because we'll get new cameras at year 2.5, we'll get new cameras at year 5, and the warranty will carry us for another 2.5 years. So for 7.5 years, we've guaranteed that our officers are going to be wearing workable, usable cameras. They give us 10 spares if one breaks. That was another good thing about this vendor. A lot of the other vendors, you had to mail it back, and they'd mail you a new one. So you could have 4 or 5, 6 days where one of your officers that normally wears a camera doesn't have one. This vendor gives us spares. We put the spare on the officer. We send the broken unit back to them. They send us a new one. We put the new one back in the spare inventory, and we move on with our day. We don't have any hitches in the system. People are wearing them all the time. There's just a lot of things that seem like they're going to work out very well.
Okay, now it sounds like it's similar to the way you handle your portable radios, where each officer has their own radio they take home or whatever, and it's theirs to maintain.
Correct.
So if you're getting 325 body cameras, does that mean each officer is getting assigned a camera?
For the most part,
it's not
yes.
like going into a charger and pulling one at the beginning of your ship. And
Nope, they will. So they will go into a charger, and the charging stations are the first phase of what we're dealing with right now. We have upwards of 20-something charging stations that hold 6 cameras each, and we had to make sure we had plugs. And then when you put the camera in the charging station for it to charge, it also automatically does all the software updates. Those charging stations are connected to a network, a secure network, and if there's a software upgrade on the camera system, it will use that. If there's data that wasn't uploaded through Wi-Fi, it will upload that data. So those are creating some infrastructure changes for us. So that's what we're dealing with actually right now as I sit here. But Most officers will have their own. We do want to keep a reserve of them, like I said, in case you have officers that work private duty, in case you have, our detective divisions will probably not have a dedicated camera for every officer, but if they're out doing something proactive, they'll sign, 5 or 6 cameras out so that we make sure that we have them during that. So the majority of them will be assigned to individual officers, yes.
Okay, because I think you said you're getting 325, and we have roughly, depending on whose number you go by, 350, 380 officers, whatever. But that includes lieutenants,
Correct.
deputy chiefs, detectives.
Yep, that includes everybody.
Yeah, so patrol
So-
is the main.
So you can have,
CSOs.
24 lieutenants, 5 captains, 2 assistant chiefs, 4 deputy chiefs. I mean, we start whittling those numbers down of individuals that aren't going to be regularly in a situation where you would need a camera. We're down pretty close to that 325 mark. So in the beginning, certainly we will be able to assign them to all of our patrol officers, our traffic division, our CSOs, the folks that are going to be, we want to make sure that we have most of detention already has cameras in it, but we might want a camera down there for dealing with special circumstances where an officer could put a body camera on if they have to deal with a particularly aggressive individual or something. So we want to have options like that, and that's part of this policy committee, is to really see where those outlying areas we can deploy a camera that will help us and get our bang for
Well,
our
I think the
buck.
part that's nice also, in booking, I don't believe those cameras have audio.
No.
Whereas the body cameras would. So you'd be picking up any
Right.
obscenities, anything yelled or screamed or whatever. So.
And that could be just you identify likely your intake officer, the person that actually takes the prisoners in, might be identified as the person that wears the camera for the shift. So we put 3 cameras down there. You have 1 for every shift, and then in the off shifts, they're updating their software and they're getting recharged. So
Now, do you think these are being well received out in the community? Are you getting much feedback from people saying we can't wait for this, or it's about time, or?
So I've heard a couple responses, mostly positive, that this is a good thing. It's going to be one more kind of tool to hold people accountable and to make
I don't see
sure.
how it can't be a positive thing.
So you always get some naysayers, and as we went through the process and we tried to go out and explain like we do with just about everything, what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve, we did get some people that said, well, it's not going to change anything. There's still going to be people that misbehave, and that's true. I mean, if we could make everyone follow policy, then my policy writing days would probably be over.
Yeah, in a perfect world, but before we were going on the air, we were talking about the incident in Dallas this past
Yeah.
weekend. Crazy things happen.
Yeah.
And to have that documented on video, which that officer wouldn't be on video because she was already going home.
Right.
But I mean, if it alleviates questions and clarifies situations, okay, this is right, this is wrong, and you get rid of that gray area that breeds this mistrust, I think it's only going to be a good thing.
What a lot of people didn't think about in the beginning, and myself included, is the value of other officers seeing the video and learning from it. We have a couple incidents, let's say a day, that could be looked at for either litigation or a citizen complaint or something like that. In the past, there's no way for your other 379, if we have 380 officers, to see what happened in that interaction. And if we're looking at that as something that's valuable for all officers to see, we take those videos, and I would guarantee that a section of our Give Back Day training, which our officers go through that 5 times a year, will involve a peer review of incidents that occur. And it could be something that we see that's exceptionally right, or it could be something that we see that's exceptionally wrong. But
That's what I was going to ask you. Was there any plans for lack of a better term, like quality control review?
Absolutely.
To see how officers interact with people. So, somebody just sit down and watch a few hours of video and say, hey, we could do better here, we could do better here.
So one of the agreements with the union is that we don't arbitrarily examine these videos for discipline purposes. So we don't go out and troll to establish discipline or to come up with discipline. And I think that's something a lot of places are doing. I think that creates an air of
It
mistrust.
comes to you on its own plenty without having to go
Correct.
looking for it.
Correct. So, and then, but once that happens, we do know when you have a critical incident, the unfortunate incident where Officer Kiddick was stabbed, that's an incident where you could take some video and you might be able to provide training that could save another officer's life. And that's, I think, where we'd see the benefits in training.
And that's, I was talking to somebody that does firearms training and I said, I've been watching an awful lot of these body cam videos online on YouTube and things like that. And I said, it's amazing to me the tactical errors that people make. Whether you get somebody stopping a car and they've both got their guns drawn and the crossfire from each other.
Yeah.
And I said, that's the one thing that should be used as a learning tool to say, okay, tactically this was a disaster. Let's think about retraining so that we do it right.
Yeah. You see a lot of scenarios where you hear people say, well, if the officer had used good tactics, that use of force may never have happened. And what better way to show officers that is to show them the scenario where, look, you could have shot your fellow officer. They were sitting right across from you. All it had to do was ricochet off the hood of the car, and you would hit your own cop. That's a learning moment that I think if officers see that visually on a video, it's going to sink in more than if our use of force instructors say, hey, don't stay out of crossfire. I think the visual aspects of the cameras will be a tremendous help.
Well, there was a lot more I wanted to go through, especially regarding citizen complaints, but we're going to be out of time in a few minutes. But
we can do it again.
I don't think a lot of people fully comprehend what they can and can't do when they have an interaction with a police officer. How do you keep that from escalating? What are your rights? Like, there was a big thing on Facebook over the weekend. Everybody's saying, I don't have to give a cop my name. And I says, yes, you do. If they have probable cause to stop you, it's interfering if you don't give your name or give your ID. And I pulled up the state statute, 53A, whatever, 167 or whatever it was, and I put it on Facebook, and people say, no, I don't have to give a cop my name. You're right. If you're walking down the street minding your own business and do nothing, it's like stop and frisk. They can't come up and say, put your hands against the wall and pat you down.
Correct.
But if a cop has probable cause, we got a complaint of trespassing in this area, and they're on an actual call with probable cause to question the people that are there, and they ask you your name, can you say, hell no, I'm not answering your questions?
You can, but like
it probably doesn't end well.
But like you said, I mean, there's an interfering charge. So if an officer has reasonable suspicion to make a stop, if there's no reasonable suspicion, if there's no probable cause, two different levels, then you're right. You don't have to say anything to a police officer. You don't have to give them anything, your name, anything. But if an officer rises to the level of reasonable suspicion, and we train our officers to let people know when that threshold has been met, so that you do then have to provide identification, basic information. You have that came out recently in the video that we discussed earlier, where the right to remain silent. People mistake that, so that the right to remain silent is a Miranda warning. Having to give someone those Miranda warnings is only triggered with custody and interrogation. But short of that, people always have the right to remain silent, right? There's the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination in your First Amendment free speech rights. But when you're a subject of a legal stop by a police officer, you do have to give identifying information. And if you don't, that interfering charge can be triggered. What we try to do is train our officers to communicate well enough where we don't get to that place, where it's this stalemate of I'm not telling you anything.
Well, that was one of the questions on Facebook, and people saying, are officers trained to let you know when you've crossed that threshold?
Yes.
That it's not just an innocent thing, that they're there because they had a complaint.
Yep.
And I said, I can't answer for that, but I would imagine in most cases they would.
Whether it's a complaint or you think of the Terry versus Ohio case of an officer that observed behavior that was reasonable suspicion that a crime was being or was about to be committed. Now you're making a lawful stop as a police officer based on articulable facts, whether they're a citizen complaint or whether it's from another officer or whether it's something that's observed. And our officers should not be saying, just because I'm asking. They should be saying, well, this is the reason that you have to give me. This is what I observed, and why don't you try to explain that to me? And that's the, I guess for lack of a better term, verbal judo or persuasive talk or de-escalation. It falls under many headings, but it is I can train our officers. I might be able to do a Citizens Police Academy. I might be able to train a certain percentage of citizens. But citizens aren't generally expected to know all of these laws, and it is incumbent upon us to explain those before the situation escalates into this contempt of cops.
And a lot of things have changed too, where, a lot of cops used to be aggravated if they saw a video camera or a phone pointed at them.
Yeah.
Now they know that
it's
they're
commonplace
right.
now.
You can't grab that phone and take it away.
Correct.
Because it's my right to videotape the interaction,
Yep.
as long as I'm not being intrusive or causing problems.
Correct, and all of our officers do know that, and hopefully, if you have somebody that is interfering by taking the video, that you're, in a rapidly evolving situation, that you're able to explain that before it goes bad.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation, especially in the current climate with law enforcement and police community relations.
Yep.
But I think we can all do a much better job of trying to understand where the other person's coming from. No, especially adult males, we don't like being questioned or have somebody tell us, take your hands out of your pockets, stand this way, stand that way.
Yep.
But there's a reason for it. And, I've got a lot of friends who are police officers, and the one thing you hear from a lot of them is, well, at the end of my shift, I'm going home. I'm going home to my family, I'm going to stay safe. And you may not understand why he says, get your hands out of your pockets. How long, Trish? 3, okay. But there's a reason for it. And we have to, at some point, say, okay, we trust the cop. It's the same with probable cause. I was telling people over the weekend, it's not too hard to establish. The officer can say, well, the way he was walking down the street holding his waistband on his pants, with my training tells me he could have a gun in his waistband. So that's why I stopped him and questioned him. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. If you don't have a gun on you, it's an inconvenience, but what's the issue?
The issue that I've seen is when that's not explained. When you're addressing somebody like that, what we hear from our cops is that the situation's evolving. I don't have time to explain. If you're talking to the individual and explaining something to them while you're patting someone down, while you're having them put their hands in a certain place for your safety, it's another method for them to be thinking of something else. They're listening to your words, and they can be distracted enough where they might not get the jump on the officer. So it's, the training nowadays says, have those conversations. You might not be able to have a full-blown hour-long training session with a citizen, but you can explain a bulge in their jacket. You can explain behavior that led you to believe a certain thing that gave you the lawful right to stop them. And I think that's what people are looking for.
Well, that's, and Trish said 3 minutes, so we're probably down to about 2 now, but, the Citizen Police Academy is something we've talked about, in private conversations. I think that would be a terrific idea to get that implemented again, because so many people don't understand why the cops do what they do. And I think a little bit of that education would bring about a better understanding and a better cooperation between the community. And you're not gonna get everybody there that you need to train, but it's just.
Word of mouth's a powerful tool, though.
Yeah, well, so.
We're working on it.
Okay, well, we're out of time, the credits are starting to run. I want to thank you for coming in today. Welcome back as Assistant Chief. It's very informative to hear all these things, and hopefully answer a lot of questions people have about the implementation of body cameras. We'll have you back again.
Sounds great.
Okay, look forward to it. Thanks.